I'm going to talk about real-time bidding, talk about the companies and the technology components that they employ to execute real-time bidding, to buy ad inventory on the internet. I'm going to start out by talking about some of the history of what was there before, what was basically existed prior to the technology becoming important or actually being developed. And we'll talk a little bit about how the agencies plug in, where the advertisers sit, where the publishers sit, and we'll talk about a little bit, because someone mentioned it yesterday, a little bit about how we fit into this whole paradigm. So I'm going to start by talking about this sort of a pitch about, like, I used to call it how a bill becomes a law, because it's how does an ad get served to you on the internet. So let's start by talking about what was there before. So dial back the clock to about 2007, 2008, probably a time frame between maybe 01 and 08. This is what existed. So you go to a web page, and there are some ads on the web page. Maybe there's one down at the bottom. And these ads make a request out. The code for the ad makes a request out to an ad server. And this is usually like a double click. Which is owned by Google. And DoubleClick serves as the primary ad server for a lot of the traffic on the web. So most publishers have, DoubleClick as their first stop shop. They're familiar with the tools. It's kind of ubiquitous at this point. So what DoubleClick had inside, this is prior to real-time bidding again, is they had they had a list of ads that they could have served to fill this spot, and each of those ads had some sort of a price tag on it. Like $5. It's got things like how many impressions it needs. It's got things like a frequency cap. And they have things like a rank. So the way DoubleClick serves is by the preference of the publisher. So if the publisher struck a deal, with these top 4 advertisers, and they said, okay, we'll give you this many impressions at this price and give you a frequency cap of this, and we'll just make that happen. It's a handshake deal. It's a contract deal directly between the publisher and either the advertiser or the advertiser's agent. And the advertisers send the publisher the creatives and all that stuff, and the publisher traffics it directly into DoubleClick. So that's say the top, maybe 20, maybe, let's see. So we like to think in 80-20 rules. So like the 20% of the ads sitting up here on the top are direct deals, and they're providing the publisher with 80% of the revenue that the publisher's making on them. And then there's the other 80% of stuff, which are ad networks, generally, all the way down until they get to like their remnant or their house ads. And these are either like ads for other things on the publisher's site. If you're NBC.com, these are your other shows that are not the show that you're looking at. These might be PSAs. They might be any number of things. So that was back in 01, 02, up to maybe 06, maybe 05. Then instead of house ads, they had another guy slotted in here. That was a yield optimizer. And the yield optimizers are companies, they were companies like PubMatic and AdMeld and Rubicon, where I used to work. And the yield optimizers had relationships with a whole slew of other ad networks. So if you can imagine this little block of inventory down here, this little block of ad space down here. Think of that going to a PubMatic or a Rubicon. and there is, say, 300 ad networks available to plug in. Now, not all of them are plugged in for every publisher, but let's say there are 300 ad networks they could potentially plug in. These guys are collecting all the stats on the ad networks every day. And so they're optimizing the order in which the ads get served in this space. So let's say for NBC there were 30 ad networks, and Rubicon had ads queued up, and the top one was serving a 15-cent CPM, and they had a frequency cap of 3 per day on it. And the next one down was a 10-cent CPM, and they had a 5 per day on it, and so on and so forth. And they would collect all the stats every day, and they would determine what the values were going to be. So they'd do some math, and they'd say, okay, we think this is 15 cents, it's 10 cents, so on and so forth. So this started to take over this space. So instead of having ad networks down here, you'd have your direct sold, and then you'd have like maybe a yield optimizer, maybe some networks, but a yield optimizer, and then all the relationships, the ad networks, instead of being part of this double-click interface, the publisher moved them into Rubicon system, or moved them into Pragmatic system, because they could do this optimization. They could automatically stack rank those appropriately and make more money. So what ended up happening is they generated a lot of lift here. So money went up. So this 80% of traffic started to generate a little bit more money. So not so much 20%, maybe sometimes 25%, sometimes 30%, sometimes more and more. So they started making more money for the publishers. So the publisher continued to focus on the direct campaigns. Of course, there are rules set up so that there's no the direct deals don't end up down in this space over here, because they don't want to cannibalize their own sales. So there's all kinds of rules set up for that. So these yield optimizers were put in an interesting place. They had relationships with hundreds and hundreds of networks, hundreds of buyers. They had relationships with publishers. So the notion of real-time bidding sort of came up around maybe 2009, 2008 timeframe. Maybe 2009 is when we really started paying attention to the idea. And it had the same structural relationship. Like on the outset, it looked like, oh, well, you have relationships with buyers, and you still sit in this space. You're still dealing with quote unquote remnant traffic. So in 2009, all these guys started building real-time bidding stacks, and there's sort of a fundamental difference in the technology of collecting stats from ad networks and serving ads by a projected value, and real-time bidding, which is collecting bids in real time and serving the actual value of the ad. And we'll get to how that works in a minute. So these guys started evolving, and yeah, I'm going to erase this, and then everybody kind of got the lay of the land here? Okay. So 2009 happened. A very good year. So what did it look like? So the existing stack looked like, with the ad networks, it was, ad request comes into AdMeld or Rubicon or whatever, and then AdMeld says, okay, I've got my layer of ads here. Each has a projected value. I'm going to pick the one that's going to serve, make the publisher the most money. I'm going to send that back out. Potentially, it was a guess. It was a guess. It was an educated guess, but it was a guess. And probably 80% of the time they were right. In the case of when they were wrong, that 20% of the time, this ad tried to serve, and the ad network that it reached out to, because you got to get to the ad network to say, hey, ad network, we want to actually serve an ad from you, right? We know you're going to pay 20 cents. The ad network would say, no, 20% of the time. And that would come back to the AdMeld or the Rubicon. That request, basically, they'd send the impression back in the browser. So they'd put another tag in the browser that said, go back and request something from AdMeld. And that would come back, and then AdMeld would have to pick another ad. Oh, well, the next highest paying one is whatever, ad 2. So that goes out. And then hopefully that one serves. But you do that 20% of the time, that now represents 200 milliseconds to the user. That doesn't seem like a lot. But imagine it happening 10 times on a given impression. So that 200 milliseconds now becomes a whole second plus, because of what we call defaulting. So all this, none of the ad networks want this user. Maybe you've browsed the entire internet, you're worthless, and nobody wants to serve an ad to you. So you do, and you end up seeing a PSA or something way down at the bottom. When you get down to the bottom of a yield optimizer's ad stack, you are really, you've seen all the ads. All of them. So it's like, there's like 3% of the population gets down here, or something like that. It's really small number, and they don't pay anything, so that's good. So this is really inefficient. So the industry changed, and it changed. We got the call from DataZoo. DataZoo called up, "Hey, I want to talk to you about real-time bidding. We're gonna make it happen." Okay, well, what does it look like? So we had a couple conversations. There was a little buzz in the market about this technology, so we went ahead and decided to build it, and started a 2-year journey of building and rebuilding the real-time bidding stack. But what does it look like? Well, still in the middle, you've got your ad server, and as part of that ad server, you've got this RTB system. So an ad request comes in now. Be nice if everybody labeled their advertisements, although these kind of label themselves anymore. An ad request comes in now, and it gets into the ad server, and the ad server says, "Oh, hey, this ad is a candidate for real-time bidding. So let's go and make real-time bidding requests." So the real-time bidding system on the server side makes real-time bidding requests to the likes of Turn, DataZoo, MediaMath, etc. Rocket Fuel, AppNexus, makes up to, on a good day, if you were the first impression to arrive at the door, it would make 100 requests. Generally, it's less than that, between 10 and 20 requests. And all these guys are going to evaluate the impression. So how can they do that? Well, they get some information. So along with this request, obviously the page URL comes in here. There's a user, some sort of user ID. And the domain name, the session depth, which is how many ads have you seen? How many ads have you seen on this site today? And that's anywhere between whatever. It's between 1 and 1 million or whatever. Depends on if you're browsing the internet all friggin' day, your session's going to be pretty deep. But it resets after a period of time. And this information is passed on to all these guys. So they get the page URL, and they get some form of user ID. Now, how does that make any sense to them, the user ID? There's a whole synchronization process that goes on. Well, let's see. Yeah, I guess we can start in here. When you see an ad on any page, and you pull up your ghost tree, right? You get a flood of, like, down at the bottom of the page, you get this little thing that says, Rubicon, and then it says AppNexus, and then it says Turn, and DataZoo, and Rocket Fuel, and et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes it says Signal down at the bottom, which you see. But why are all these pixels? You're only looking at one ad. Why are you getting all these pixels? This is the user synchronization. Anybody familiar with how user synchronization works? because it works. Okay, it works exactly the same as it does here. It works over there. So this pixel, let's say it's turns pixel. Turns pixel gets dropped at the bottom of this add request after the ad is served. But we'll get to how that gets. We'll get to that in a second. So turns pixel sitting here. So that makes a request out to turn server. And turn says, now turn can read the cookies because the browser made a request to it. Now the cookies can be read. So turn says, oh, I know this guy. He's user 123. Great. Hey, sorry. So what's turn going to do with this information? Well, he's going to drop the Rubicon pixel, but he's going to put a little question on it. It says, hey, user is 123, right? So this gets back into the browser and makes a request out to Rubicon with that information, user 123. Rubicon turns around, serves an image, a GIF image, 1 by 1 pixel, with a cookie that says, turn user 123. Now, assume that happened on the previous ad request. Now, on this ad request, Rubicon gets to read all those cookies that it set previously. So it reads out of its own cookie space that this is turn user 123. And it passes that on to turn. So now turn, through whatever tracking mechanisms it uses throughout the internet, sees, oh, 123, I know that guy. That guy, he likes Fords. He's got 2 kids. He lives in Connecticut. Can't spell Connecticut. He lives in Connecticut.
How does Turn know that?
Maybe Turn's got an integration with DataZoo. Maybe Turn's got an integration with other folks out there. Turn loves data, so they've got all kinds of profile information on people. But so long as they can identify the user on a server-side call, they can look up that user's records. And DataZoo and MediaMath and Rocket Fuel and AppNexus, they have this similar systems where they synchronize the users. In fact, AppNexus won't bid on users that are not synchronized, so they don't even want to see them. And so now they have intelligence. They've got the page URL, they've got the session depth, they've got the user ID, they know all this rich data about the user. Now they can say, okay, what ad campaigns do I have targeted at these factors that represent this user? Then they can make an informed decision about which ad do I want to send back and how much do I want to pay for that ad to show that guy an ad. So they now send back a response that says, here's my ad. It's Verizon because he's got a Ford, he's 2 kids. They've done some lookalike targeting. He's a good candidate for a cell phone. He wants the new iPhone because he's from Connecticut. People from Connecticut love phones.
As long as you're from the west side, man.
West side Connecticut.
East siders, man, they don't know what they're up to.
Yeah, Google phone guys. So they serve Verizon and they say, okay, we'll bid a $2 CPM. And even though they're only buying one ad, they still represent it in the denomination of cost per thousand. So they still say $2 CPM. Well, that ad, what is it? 2/10 of a cent. Thank you, Mr. Genius.
Stop.
No, you're good.
All right. Keep going.
2/10 of a cent is the real value. Why did we? Because I was a part of this. Why did we choose to keep it in CPM prices? Because when you get to really small numbers in computers, they start to make mistakes. So if we started doing things like 2/10 of a cent, and then we started tabulating that for the publishers at individual impressions and saying, okay, here's how much you made, there are going to be a lot of errors that will build up. So we stayed with the CPM price.
Did they learn that the hard way?
Huh?
Did they learn that the hard way?
No, we actually figured that out before we did it. We actually looked at it. We're like, yeah, when we get below 5 decimal places, it's going to get messy. So actually, the protocol now specifies you can't get more precise than 5 decimal places because even the bidding algorithms get a little confused. because there's a lot of math in there. So Turn's doing $2 CPM. Data Zoo maybe $1.50. They're going to try to sell the guy on a GM car. Media Math. I'm trying to think of who they have relationships with. Anyway, so they're selling an AT&T phone. And, these other guys, maybe they're selling belly fat. Who knows? Still a thing. Belly fat ads, acai berries. So these all get into the RTB system, right? And then it goes through a set of filters. And the filters will filter out things like belly fat ad. And maybe the site that it's on is... who owns AT&T? Maybe they're hostile towards AT&T, so they say we don't want to see AT&T ads. So that one gets cut out. So now there's these two bids here, and there's probably a bunch more, but there's two bids for $1.50 and $2. So you got your bid. You got your $2 bid for Verizon, and your $1.50 bid from, who was it, GM? This makes it easy. So what happens in here? So there's an auction. And in the auction, it's run on the mechanics of a victory auction, which is a second price auction. And the rules of a second price auction are that for any given top bid, the clearing price will not be more than the second highest bid. So in this case, Verizon would serve the ad at $1.50 CPM. And that does a couple things. One, it makes the auction relatively fair and consistent. Two, it encourages people to bid their value. When Verizon, or Turn on behalf of Verizon, realizes that, well, I'm only paying $1.50 most of the time, and sometimes I'm losing bids. Even though I'm bidding $2, I could bid $3 and probably not spend that much more, but really still get the inventory that I need. So if they raise their bids to $3, in this scenario, what would they pay? They'd still only pay $1.50. But if there are other auctions that they're losing because somebody's coming in at $2.25, they would start winning those auctions at $2.25. So they're spending a little more, but they're getting the users they want. So that's sort of the purpose of using a second price auction, this model. And AdWords uses a similar model to that. So it's not...
It's a penny plus.
Right, they use a penny plus model. Like we looked at that and we're like, no. let's just do it at a straight, flat second price. We don't need to squeeze the penny, because it made things infinitely more complicated to debug. So Verizon realized that, or Turn on behalf of Verizon, so they actually raised their bid to $3. And that's good for the publisher, because the publisher, even though Verizon's only spending a little bit more, the publisher's making more money. So we use a second price auction, the publisher's making more money. If we went, imagine a first price scenario. What would happen if Verizon sees it, oh, you're bidding $2, you're winning at $2, what's Turn going to do on behalf of Verizon? They're going to send the next bid at $1.99, right? And the next one at $1.98, or so on and so forth, until they get down to $1.50, right? They're going to expend a lot of energy figuring out the $1.50. And then you're going to end up driving the price down to that anyway. And these guys, GM, realize they're losing. They're gonna do $1.51, but now they're gonna figure out that, there's other players messing around. We're just gonna freaking walk away. We're gonna go buy inventory somewhere else. So this whole notion of a bidding war doesn't really happen, and it's a lot of wasted effort, because what ends up happening is you end up back at $1.50 anyway. But you lose out on this. You lose out on this potential for the $3 that are clearing at $2.25. You actually lose the publisher money by doing a traditional first price auction. The other reason a second price auction works in this scenario where first price doesn't is because you can't come back and make a second bid on the impression. You get one shot. You can submit one price, you can submit one value for a given impression. That's the only chance you get. So a traditional auction where you imagine people in a room, that's always the illustration. Everybody's in a room and there's a guy sitting up there, $5, $5, $5.50, $5.50, $5.51, $5.51, blah, 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 right? Click sold. There's no second bids. It's gone. The impression's gone. These have a finite lifespan. So it doesn't work right. The Vickery auction is a proven model. Economists came in to Google after they established it and said, yeah, you got it right. After their math guy just said, hey, this seems to make sense. And they brought in some experts and they had picked the right model. So that whole model
It's
is
basically the same way you have like a blind auction at a charity event.
yeah.
Instead of everyone writing down what their bids are, everyone just says what they'd be willing to pay, and that way it maximizes the yield.
Is that second price? Do they second price it or do they?
No, it's just whoever's willing to bid the most.
Yeah.
Some places you go and there's like a piece of paper and you can see, oh, right now that's going for $25. I'm going to bid $25.25.
Right.
Versus a blind auction at a charity event where you just say, that spa day, I'm willing to pay. It's going for a good cause. I'll give them $100
Yeah.
for that, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. So that way you get the most yield.
Right.
When other people don't have such privy information to what everyone else is bidding.
Right, and that's a good point. This is also a blind auction. So these guys have no concept of what the other bidders are bidding, except for the winner. The winner knows who the second price was. That's they get the most information. So everybody else would have to maneuver their bids around. What we ended up seeing was that some guys would come in, and when new inventory, a brand new publisher came on board, these guys would come in and just start bidding $20 CPMs just to see where things were clearing, just so that they could take that to their interface and show their users, here's about what this inventory is going for. So that was an interesting anomaly, because you'd see bid. We're like, what's going on there? I'm like, oh, they're testing the waters. Because we would track all this stuff. So in a nutshell, that's how the real-time bidding model works, and how most real-time bidding auctions are run. Today, you see ads, you see display ads running through this system. You see mobile ads running through the system. Now you see video ads starting to run through the system. Video's a little bit slow to kind of creep in here, and the reason for that is that video has a ton of demand and not a lot of supply. So there wasn't a role for a yield optimizing company to come in and make the video publisher more money, because there was so much demand they didn't have any trouble making money. So real-time bidding's been a little slow to move into video, but it has. You see Brightroll has built out a system, and I'm not sure who the other players are, but I know those guys are. Does anybody know the other video players? Tube Mogul. Yeah, they were big in real-time bidding.
Attitude.
Adapt TV. Expo. So yeah, most of these guys have real-time bidding stacks as part of their system now. So from an agency side, so if you think about the agencies and the advertisers, so like GM is over here, and they've got whatever agency they're working with, and that agency has what they call a trade desk now. And the trade desk deals with one or more of these companies, and they traffic the GM ads. Now, depending on the sophistication of your trade desk, you may or may not have solved certain problems. One of the problems that we've seen when you're using multiple DSPs is controlling frequency, because each DSP has a pool of users that they've identified. If the trade desk doesn't have any technology to synchronize with those pools of users, they have no way of segmenting users by DSP. So there's a lot of overlap. So you may want a GM campaign 3 times per day to a given user, he may end up seeing it 9 times because you've targeted him on 3 different DSPs. Some trade desks have figured this problem out. I was talking to a friend over Publicis, and he told me they have solved this problem by segmenting user pools by DSP that they work with. Different DSPs offer different technologies. Turn does a lot with data, so they have a lot of data providers integrated with them. MediaMath does a lot with targeting. They can target on any vector that comes in on the bid request, as well as many others. But they've really specialized in optimizing for any particular facet of user trait or impression trait, and they've sliced and diced. They call their system the brain that does this. They're very, very proud of it. They've been working on it for 6-7 years. So DataZoo's specialized because they have a different model. These guys charge you based on what you spend. So if you spend $1 million, they're going to take 20% of that. Sorry, you spend $1 million, they're going to take 20% of that. DataZoo, you spend $1 million, they're going to look at how many impressions you bought, and they're going to charge you a fee based on the number of impressions you bought. So if you spend $1 million at a $1 CPM, or you decide to spend $2 million at a $2 CPM, they're going to charge you the same price because you bought the same number of impressions. So they have a slightly different model. Most of these guys, all the way down, take a percentage of money. DataZoo is the only one I know of. There might be another one that takes a percentage of impression, like a fixed fee on impressions bought. So, and each one, Rocket Fuel, AppNexus, they all have specialties. AppNexus is playing both sides. So they have a sell side and a buy side, and you can just go there with whatever you've got. And you don't actually have to work with an external company or buy from an external company. You buy from their own pool of inventory. It's a little more like an exchange, which is what the group there built prior to going to AppNexus. They built Right Media Exchange. So they're sort of backing into the same thing that they built before. It's a little funny. So there's some different facets. So that's not the end of the story. Because what happened with RTB is something called OpenRTB. And OpenRTB established a single protocol specification. And what that meant was that, get another color here. Look at that green. All this communication that happened in this brick over here, like I know at Rubicon, we had our own protocol. We had our own, and everybody MediaMath had to write against our API spec, essentially. So we had our own sort of language that we would send out bid requests with our own, like these different key value pairs. The OpenRTB consortium came in and said, let's standardize all of that. Let's make it one standard API so that people who are integrating between systems, because Rubicon's got a system, PubMatic had a system, Admiral had a system. Now there's probably 40 of these companies, 40 of these supply-side platforms that have their own system. These guys came in and standardized all of this. So what that did was that now MediaMath would only have to build to one spec, and the Rubicons of the world only had to support one spec. And it reduced the integration time. So if you were trying to integrate with partners quickly, you now could, because they didn't have to rewrite their software in order to communicate with you. So plugging in, it's like the outlet. Imagine going to a new building and you have to get different outlet adapters, right? For every different building in the city. What a pain. So now everybody's using the standard 3-prong outlet. So what that did, it opened up the market. So now this side of the equation, the buy side, went crazy. And there are probably 300 DSPs now. They're starting to look like the ad networks of old, where there were 300 to 1,000 at any given time. So now it's real easy to set up shop as a DSP. You know the protocol. You can almost buy off the shelf. I'm surprised there hasn't been an open source. In fact, I think there might be now an open source like bidding system. You could just download, install, and now suddenly you're a DSP, so long as you can get the paper agreements with all the supply sides. It's getting to the point where setting up shop as a DSP is almost turnkey. So what's happening is that these trade desks on the agency side are starting to either buy or build their own technology stacks. And what we saw in real-time bidding is, even in the early days, we saw a lot of disintermediation where players were consolidating or dropping out of the mix. And now that the trade desks are building or buying DSP stacks, you're going to see that even more. So the agencies will now have their own buying platforms. Right? And they will integrate straight with the supply side platforms. And a lot of these other guys will either specialize, get bought up, or turn into agencies themselves. And you see that with companies like X+1. I think they got bought recently, but they were more of an agency with the technology, right? So, and kind of a smart move, I thought, because they were set up as an agency with this technology component that gave them real-time bidding capabilities. And they had always built themselves like that. And that's what ended up happening, or what's ending up happening to the market, is you got that consolidation, at the agency trade desk. Fortunately for the existing real-time bidding players is that these other guys had to have a foothold and a advanced enough technology, they will survive just fine. But also, if they are too small or whatever, there's a great opportunity to get bought up by one of these trade desks, because every agency has, or every conglomerate agency has like 5 sub-agencies that deal with, different 3 or 4 different trade desks. So you've got a big pyramid there of folks. So the consolidation will kind of go up under the agency level, because of course they have the money. That's how the money goes. Money goes from the agency or the advertiser agency, and it flows over to the publisher. So anytime they can disintermediate players in that space, 2 things happen. They spend money more efficiently, but eventually publishers end up making more money in an ideal world. Of course, I've got a very publisher-centric view, given where I came from. But now the notion of remnant sort of goes out the window, because now you've got, like I'm pointing it out, you've got agencies buying in this space. So agencies don't always buy in the remnant space. What happened? The folks at the supply side platforms and the demand side platforms moved up the stack, so to speak. And what does that mean? Well, we saw in the first graphic, right? I showed you that there were these direct campaigns. And they were sitting in DoubleClick. I double-clicked enough. And by and large, they still are, but what's happening is you've got this concept of a private marketplace, or programmatic, a lot of people say. So you'll see those 2 terms kind of interchanged if you're reading about this. And the idea is that, like, you've got this OpenRTB protocol, and they've added components to that so that the DSP and the SSP can have a conversation that says, don't run your regular run-of-the-mill auction on this particular deal. Publishers are able to now put in premium inventory into the mix. And the SSPs, the Rubicons, the Pubmatics, the Admelds of the world, can say, look, this is third in session, homepage, above the fold, and it's a candidate for deals 1, 2, 7, and 12. Deals, deal ID, that is one of the biggest components of programmatic. So the deal ID is sort of an identifier that indicates to the SSP as well as the DSP that, hey, this particular impression could be part of this deal that your buyer and my seller have arranged. So in the SSPs interface, there's a place to set up a deal. And you can say, hey, I'm going to sell 1 million impression above the fold, 300 by 250s over the next month to General Motors over at Media Math. And this could be, maybe this is NBC.com. I'm just using things that are familiar to me. All right, NBC.com's 300 by 250 gets an SSP, deal IDs, the deal ID gets passed over here. Media Math says, oh, I recognize that deal. I have campaigns queued up for that. Here you go. What do these deals look like? Well, they can look like, okay, so, at the outset, what I say, 1 million impressions. For the month of October, when the football season really gets going, GM wants to serve a lot of ads on NBC.com during whatever particular dates. It's what, Sunday Night Football? So all day Sunday, and it's a $5 deal, fixed. So there's no auction run. GM's, Media Map buys the impression for GM. Maybe it's deal number 12. This is deal number 12. Oop, not 11, 12. And this, think of this like an IO, an insertion order, right? It's a deal. Very much, the aim of the industry is to replace the IO with technology layer, no more faxes, and get rid of about 12 people that have to be involved to execute one of these things. And you got the details. So here you go. Here's the deal. Okay, $5 fixed. SSP doesn't have to run an auction. Says, okay, we're just going to serve it. Done. But that's not the only kind of deal. This would be like a first price. Assuming GM came in at $5, they'd win this every time. But if they came in at $4, they'd have to compete. They'd still probably win. $4 is a pretty good price. But there's other kinds of deals. And this is, I say it's a fixed price, but it could also mean if someone came in at $10, GM would still win at $5. Even though the publisher could make more for that given impression for a $10 bid that came in, GM would still win at $5. And the reason they'd win at $5 is because NBC knows that there's a bulk buy going on here. It's a way to tell NBC, or it's a way to tell these guys to behave because there's a bulk buy going on. It's a way to transact premium inventory, premium advertising through this real-time bidding system. So this is it's a first price. It's also what I'd say it's also a discount, meaning that so long as they hit this $5 mark, they get it. Actually, I wouldn't call it a discount. I'd call it first right of refusal. A first right deal. So long as GM hits $5, they've got the first right. If they don't hit $5, if they came in at $4, that $10 bid that I talked about earlier would have won, and they would have cleared at $4. So there's all kinds of little rules that you can set up as part of these deal IDs. And what ends up happening is that where the SSPs were started off in the remnant space, and so did the DSPs for that matter, now are moving up the stack. See, and they represent it as a funnel, So here's remnant, here's your, your non-guaranteed premium. I can't spell guaranteed either. And then here's your premium. Premium direct sold. So right now, RTB is taking over this space in terms of transacting the deals. It's very likely that this will, in some ways, stay in the space of the publisher and the advertiser's control. They'll continue to do this direct sold because it's relatively easy, and it's that 20% that makes them 80% of the money, and they really don't want to mess with it. But eventually, I bet these guys are going to go after this stuff. And it's a matter of just replacing the technology that they're using. Doesn't replace the deals, doesn't replace the handshakes or the 3 martini lunches. So where do we fit in all this? Cool, 13 minutes. We fit in from a technology level, like say this is, and maybe this is crate and barrel in here as well. From a technology level, we are providing data to crate and barrel's campaigns at the DSP. So we're able to push in user segmentation information to say, hey, this user's a candidate for your campaign now because they performed this particular action on your website. So we'll push that data in to Crate and Barrel, and the DSP will pick up on it and say, okay, he's a candidate for, maybe he's a candidate for the deal, maybe he's a candidate for any number of other ad campaigns that are going on here. But we push people into user pools within that DSP. And that's a way of integrations with the likes of MediaMath, with the likes of AppNexus, and even Right Media, and so on and so forth. That's kind of, and there's a, I don't want to go into our infrastructure because it's another whole set of, it's another whole class. Not one I should be teaching at this point either. But that's, in a nutshell, that's kind of how we interact in this space. We don't do much with the SSPs at this time. I've talked to Robert at length about what it would take, and really what it would take is for the SSPs to build DSP technology for it to make sense for us to integrate with them, or for us to build something a little bit different. I'm not sure what that would look like yet. So that's real-time bidding in a nutshell.
Where's the opportunity in the space? Like, what's not being done right now? That's pretty interesting. What do you think? I mean, you know so much about the space. So.
We did it all. Without giving away any secrets.
It's all done.
Without getting myself sued for IP. Let me think.
Better stratification of the inventory. Right now, there's this big pipe of 80 billion impressions a month, I think.
Think there's opportunity to split up?
Well, just so that you get more information on the decision side, more so than just the user agent variables and the cookies and stuff you get in that handshake. To be able to say this is this kind of inventory, that kind of inventory, flavor it a little.
Right.
Metadata on the inventory.
Right, and there's like a Peer 39 integration would give you, hey, here's what this site is about. Here's what this page is about that this user's on. There's a lot of contextual that could go on there. That's been talked about on both sides. I know some folks on the DSP side have done like Peer 39 integrations, but I think there's always opportunity to go scrape and analyze and find out new vectors of interest on particular sites. There's a lot of stuff. You end up rebuilding a lot of the same technologies, right? So there's probably places where you could look at this stack and look at the companies involved and say, okay, what was done before that was really cool that's not being done now? There's a lot. AppNexus again. They're rebuilding Right Media Exchange, and it seems to be working. They got funding from Microsoft, and they're doing great. Same thing. A lot of SSPs are looking at building their own demand side platform stack, so they can kind of bolt in the same model where you've got both sides coming together within your own system. Now, one of the things I don't like about that is that I like the fact that the DSP is the buyer's rep, and they're looking out for the buyer's interests, and the SSP is the seller's rep, and they're looking out for the seller's interests. So there's balance in this equation, and there's nobody who's, if you don't have people working both sides, and you've got sort of a purity of interests. Whereas, like, you get the guys that start working both sides, you're like, well, I'm working both sides. How can I actually just squeeze more money out of the equation? I don't really, not beholden to either one of you guys.
Is it Rubicon now?
I don't know.
Yes, they are.
They're building a DSP stack, that's for sure. And that's coming out eventually. But what are they going to do with it? Who are they? They've got a couple campaigns in there. When I left, they had a couple campaigns coming out. They made a little noise in the market about it. But But it depends on how their pricing model works. I hope they go with a data zoo model where they say, look, it's fixed CPM on both sides. Here's what it is. That's it. Transact. If they went with a transparent approach, the NBC.coms of the world would continue to trust them. The problem with the folks like DoubleClick is that it's a black box. They actually don't know how much is being squeezed out of the middle. There's low visibility. There's fees coming out that the publisher sees on their bill, and there's fees coming out on the advertiser that they see on their bill, but nobody actually knows, like, well, there's something going on between there we're not actually seeing. There could be hidden fees. There could be, and nobody would be none the wiser. Like, and you wouldn't even be able to see that on a profit loss statement at the end of the quarter. Couldn't even find it, and it wouldn't come up. There's just this black box. So there's a little bit lack of trust, and maybe they're not doing that. I don't want to throw them under the bus. I don't know, but there's just a general lack of trust of DoubleClick by a lot of the big publishers. And the bigger they get, the less they trust.
In mobile, TV, web, all flowing through the same stack.
Video is, mobile definitely is. Mobile did something funny. Real-time bidding and native, or not native, but mobile app advertising sort of evolved at the same time. And mobile adopted a server-to-server communication protocol without the bidding process. So it was interesting how there was part of the protocol that was sort of implemented, but then it wasn't. So they're running a static stack. There's no auction. There's only a single response from an ad server. Say, here's my ad, and the mobile site or the mobile ad engine just served whatever the one that came back. So they made a single request for impressions. They're now moving to, and the SSPs are moving into mobile space, and mobile folks like NextAge and Millennial are moving into. NextAge was already there. Millennial built it on. They're building real-time bidding stacks, which makes a lot more sense. Video was, again, oversold, so there wasn't a demand for optimization. But they're moving for the tools for these kind of deals for other reasons. They're moving to the real-time bidding stack, and the SSPs again are either getting bought by or buying mobile SSPs, or I'm sorry, video SSPs. Video is interesting because the dollars are so big, so there's a lot of money in video. So as a supply side platform, we were kind of stuck because we didn't have anything to offer. Mobile. Like you guys are already making money gangbusters, so we can't really help you. So it was a little slow for these guys to get in. These guys wanted it, and certainly having as many buyers available for every impression makes a lot of sense because you always get the highest price. So even with video's glut of inventory, glut, is that how you say small amount? Is that the right word? No. Dearth. Even with the dearth of inventory in video, you still have this opportunity to make yet a little bit more money.
Ultimately, the market's setting the price, which seems to be,
exactly
as what we found in search, it seems to be the most fair way to do it. It's for the publisher to open it up to as many people as you said to the auction, and let the market set the price.
Yep. Yeah, and it's a marketplace now, and that's makes it much more interesting than it used to be.
I was curious how do you deal with tiebreakers on the real-time bidding? So,
Flip a coin.
Yeah, is it really just
Yep, flip a coin.
random bid, or is there like some sort of order, like this time they get it, next time the other company gets it?
If there's a deal involved, there's some sort of prioritization. But imagine, we're talking people bid $2.49,872. Bids come in looking like that.
So they're not.
So identical bids are pretty rare.
It's not very many $1.50.
No, it's actually, and because they're all calculated by computer now, like they're looking like, what is the value I need to extract from this deal? Like over here, they're saying, okay, I need to pull up my margin. Okay, what is the bid price now? It's some obscure little number,
Sure.
or whatever. So yeah, they're always very strange. One of them, it's a good point that you bring up, but it also brings up another idea. Something that the DSPs have started to do in the last couple of years is they're submitting multiple bids per impression. And there's a lot of good things coming out of that, particularly on the supply side. They're getting greater visibility into the demand. So it's a truer auction with full visibility for the seller. And if the buy side's first ad gets blocked by advertiser blocking or creative blocking or whatever, they have other bids in there that can take its place. So it's
like one of the filters being on the buy side. One of the filters is like they've sold this. ESPN.com has a but a Coca-Cola ad at the top. So anytime Coke appears on a page, they don't want Pepsi on the page, and Pepsi doesn't want to be where Coke is. So a filter rule gets written in that any page where Coke's on, Pepsi doesn't apply. So that's why if you're media math and you've got the top two bids, you have a $3 bid and a $2.50 bid, every other bid is 2.5, then you want to make sure that by these different blocking things, or as you said, there's a quality issue about belly fat ads or teeth whitening ads, or
it could be anything.
Flash aliens. There's all sorts of filters on this stuff, but one of those is the creative collision, they call it,
right.
which is an important thing for brands, because if you work in an agency and you've ever gotten that phone call with a screenshot because the CEO saw
Coke and Pepsi on the same page
right next to it, sent a screenshot to his CMO, send it to them, send it to me. Then you know why they put those filters in. But there's a lot of this quality control. They even have automated tools to check creative that looks for skin tone, too much flesh in an ad, or looks for words that are undesirable in an ad.
And there's still mistakes. Mistakes are still made. You still get, and these are really hard to avoid at this time. Although I've did a little work on sort of specking out how you could avoid them, but you still get like imagine seeing a healthcare ad on an Ebola page right now. Probably not where you want to be.
Or the famous one is the airline
on a crash. Yeah, that one's pretty bad.
That's all loaded into the DSP side.
You create a filter on your side that says, scan the page if the term airplane crash appear, or a whole whitelist of terms.
Probably just the term crash. They're probably pretty skittish about
crash in general, unless
crash.
It's like drum crash.
Yeah. But they'd probably avoid drum crash too. There's plenty of inventory out there.
Kind of crash.
That's the agency that does that?
No, that's kind of
the technology will do it.
The publisher is saying, there's a standard list of stuff like that.
Yeah.
The publisher would say, we just don't want it to affect our site.
Yeah.
So even if you get the highest bid from an airline, you're going to say, we're going to not take this bid because we know you would not like it. And
yeah, there's a lot of.
So the DSP knows the filters ahead of time?
the publisher sets the filters. The
There's
DSP
two
is
sides.
willing to buy whatever.
The DSP will set filters too. They want to protect their buyers.
Right.
Publisher sets filters based on competitive.